Hey there, everybody. Nice to see so many people on this webinar. This is great since this has been a little hobby of mine in the last few weeks is to try to figure out how to educate people as best I can on what our immune system actually is and how we can affect it. But before I start, would somebody mind raising their hand if they can both hear and see me, just so I know that this is actually working? Great, thank you very much. Yeah, there's always a little bit of anxiety when one starts these webinars because when you're not talking to an actual physical audience, it's like, are you guys out there or not? Is it just, gibberish coming out of your speakers right now? Um, okay, so today is day 3 of the 3-part webinar that I've been doing. You'll remember that part 1, for those of you who have caught them all, and I'm going to send out an email with all the protocols from the webinars and links to the replays, okay? So, right now, today is, I think, day 19 of the stay-at-home shutdown. So, all of us have been hunkered down for a while, and this is from the COVID-19 virus. I'm putting that out there just in case people watching this on replay are wondering when in history we were actually doing this talk. And when this all started and, we began to be hunkered down, I started to think about how little understanding of actual immune function there is out there amongst the general public. And the way that I really saw this play out was like massive selling out of like all kinds of different supplements. Like, within days, you couldn't even buy vitamin C, you couldn't buy, things like echinacea and stuff were getting sold out. And this weird piecemeal grabbing, like sort of hoarding and kind of grabbing of different supplements made me realize that like from a larger picture, from a systems wide picture, there was really a lack of understanding about what immune function is and how we properly take care of it. So in the 3-part series, the first one, if you guys were on it, remember, was the mucosal barrier of the body and our immunity, right? That's things coming in and first sort of hitting that mucosal barrier of the nasal passages or the upper respiratory tract or the lungs, or, there's mucosal barrier in our gut, there's mucosal barrier in the urinary tract, all through the body. And so that's the barrier where we can actually have things pass through and affect us, right? That's why we're told not to touch our face and stuff. It's those mucosal tissues that we're concerned about, right? So we did a webinar on that. That was part 1, and you guys can go back and watch that one on the replay. Part 2 was all about the gut and the microbiome. The majority of our immune system is actually centered around the gut, and this has always been a critical principle in pretty much every systems-based medical system, whether you're looking at Chinese medicine or naturopathic medicine or functional medicine. Any systems-based medicine has always recognized the importance of the gut in terms of immune function. So we did basically a 1-hour webinar on how that gut biome immune sort of axis plays out, how we can influence it and maximize immunity there. And then today we're going to end our 3-part series with a talk about key nutrients and what exactly they do and how to supplement them in terms of our immune function. And this is a really important topic. And at first I was like, okay, I'm going to try to bang this out in like 30 minutes or something, because people like, quick, punchy webinars. Then I realized that like we have a lot of material to cover here. If I'm going to give you an understanding of how these things play into the immune system, how to properly know if you need them, and then how to not waste your money and get caught up in mass hysteria around single specific supplements. So I realized that this is a large topic. This is where we're going to round out these 3 webinar series, but it's an important one, okay? It's an important one for all of us. So for those of you who don't know me, I can see sort of on the attendee list, there's a Some people I know, there's a bunch of people I don't know. So if I've never met you before, I'm Duncan Macdonald, and I have been practicing both Chinese medicine and functional medicine in the San Francisco Bay Area for 21 years now. I am senior faculty at the Kalish Institute of Functional Medicine, so I spend quite a bit of my time teaching functional medicine, which is lab-based protocol medicine, to sort of the next generation of physicians. So one of the things is sometimes I get a little bogged down in the weeds with some of the technical stuff because I'm kind of used to teaching to other types of healthcare providers. So I've purposely tried to keep this not too in the weeds, but there's a little bit into the weeds we need to go in order for you to have proper understanding and context. So that's a little bit about me. Okay, so some of the things that I want to cover today, some like foundational issues that we're going to talk about, is we're going to dispel this notion of boosting the immune system, and we're going to think about normalizing the immune system. Okay, then we're going to look at some of the star players in terms of nutrients and immune function. These are like zinc, vitamin D, vitamin C, right? These are the ones that everybody is just buying up like mad at the health food store right now, and like, you know, you can't even order on Amazon. But then we're going to take a step back. We're going to look at how important those are, but we're also going to look at why the research is often inconclusive on these supplements, why there are many other supplements that are important for immune function. And so we're going to take a look at the body's nutritional needs as a whole when it comes to immune function. And that's where we're going to talk about mitochondrial energy and immune function down here. And finally, we're going to talk about inflammation and how that relates to supplementation. Because a lot of you have probably been hearing about this cytokine storm problem that is happening with this current COVID virus. And this was actually, and we'll talk about this later on, but the cytokine storm, this term was actually coined when we were dealing with the H5N1 avian flu a number of years ago. And it's a specific immune reaction and inflammatory reaction that can be really problematic. And this is what is causing people to go onto respirators and stuff right now. So we're going to cover all of that, okay? Okay, so first of all, let me go on a brief little tirade. And it's not really a tirade, but it's important for you guys to understand this concept, right? We are constantly looking at the health news that gets fed to us. And we'll often see stuff like, oh, vitamin D found to be helpful for depression, and then vitamin D not helpful for depression, or, you know, vitamin E is helpful for preventing prostate cancer. Oh, wait, no, vitamin E is not helpful. And there's always this conflicting information that's going around. The thing to understand about supplements and any type of supplement program is they only work if you need them, right? So if you take a huge portion of the population and let's say you put them on vitamin C to see if it's going to prevent upper respiratory infections like colds, right? You'll find that, you know, it seems to work for some people and it seems to have no effect on others. And what you can bet is the problem there is whether they actually need that particular vitamin or not. So just kind of supplementing without proper research, it can sometimes be harmful. You know, there are some nutrients that we don't want to take too much of, some supplements, and it can also just be counterproductive. Like, it can be a waste of money. You can be pouring that stuff into the toilet, basically. So understand that when you see these confusing headlines, it often has to do with just how the study was actually designed. If we actually tested all the population and we chose a number of people who were severely vitamin D deficient, and then we supplemented them with vitamin D for 6 months, we would see a huge benefit across that population, right? So it really comes down to whether or not it is something that you need. Okay, so we're going to get into some quick physiology here, and I promise I won't make this this too painful. I don't want you to have flashbacks of being in high school AP bio or whatever, but there's a couple of things that we need to understand if we're going to talk about immune function. So the body really has two types, two aspects to its immune function, right? There's what we call innate immunity, and there's what we call adaptive immunity. Now, innate immunity is like your first responders or something in your body. They are the ones where some type of virus or pathogen has sort of hit that mucosal barrier, and they're what are like rally up right from the beginning to go at and try to attack and destroy, right? So these are the first responders who are coming to immediately attack and destroy some type of pathogen coming into the body. And then there is, and that this takes place really fast, you guys. Like we're talking, within hours, this is activated. And this is still running in the background while our adaptive immunity takes over. And our adaptive immunity is the way that we sort of form antibodies. The body starts to recognize the proteins of a particular invader and starts to tag it. And we create antibodies so that more specific immune cells can go and attack those pathogens that we have tagged with the antibodies, and we can clear them. And this is what we are testing for, or we're hoping to test for coming up here soon. There's a small trial in Colorado going on right now with an antibody test for COVID-19. This is the test that would tell you, if you have antibodies, were you exposed to this and recovered from it? Because we're hearing more and more about asymptomatic carriers. This is the test that we need to figure it out. Okay, the testing that we're doing right now is more in this innate immunity stage, where we're actually doing what's called a PCR test, and we're looking for the actual COVID-19 virus. But if the body has already cleared the virus, like let's say you had it a while ago, it's not going to show up on that test. And that's why there are some limitations even to the, there's limitations to the testing rollout, but there's limitations to the technology of testing that we're using right now. So innate immunity is, triggered right away when you get exposed to something. Within hours, our body rallies these macrophages and these other cells to go after, any type of invader. And then the body starts to get wise to these infections and starts to develop antibodies. And this is important because these two different immune functions, they're kind of affected differently by different supplementation. And so we just want to keep that in mind a little bit. So once again, here's kind of another graph showing innate and adaptive immunity, and then some areas that they have in common. Like I said, it's not like this part happens and then ceases while adaptive immunity starts. It just is sort of a continuation thereof. Okay, so we're going to start by talking about zinc. And I know that I'm going to be talking a little fast, you guys, and you will get a replay of this webinar. So don't feel like you have to take notes. Maybe just relax and let the sound of my voice flow over you or something, because there's going to be a lot of information. Now, I chose zinc, vitamin D, and vitamin C to talk about today specifically, because those are the ones that I see getting the most press. And those were also the ones that I saw like panic bought from all of the distributors, like almost immediately. And they are all standout sort of supplements in terms of immune function, but there are reasons why, almost always when you see people panic buying stuff, it's like, well, what do you guys, why are you doing this exactly? And, it's sort of like the toilet paper, like, come on, you guys, like we're at day 19 of this or something now, and I still can't get toilet paper from the store, like who is sitting on these hordes of toilet paper? So what I want to point out from this graph is this is a basic sort of representation here of our innate immunity. And I'm not going to go into all these different cell types and all their different interactions because that is not important. What is important is that this second one here, everywhere we see red happening here between the interaction between these different cell types, these are all zinc dependent steps of the innate immunity. So you can sort of see that like 4/5 of the activity and interaction between the cells in our innate immunity have some dependence upon zinc. right? And this is why zinc has been shown in studies to be helpful for immune-based problems like upper respiratory infections. This is why lots of people buy zinc lozenges and take them when they feel a cold coming on or something like that. So it's a very important there. And then how do we measure zinc? Okay, and this is where we get into the really interesting part. And I'm going to try to kind of drive home a couple of points with this. Okay, so this is what we call an ion panel. This is a test that we run here at Origins Medicine, and it's a functional medicine test that we run on many patients, and it gives us an idea of what is going on from nutrient levels in the body. Okay, and here you can see that we're measuring zinc and copper in the plasma, in the blood. Okay, now zinc and copper are kind of totally related to one another. Okay, if we supplement too much with zinc, we will start to deplete copper. Okay, like some of these, when I showed you that graph before with all the ways that zinc can break down if it's absent in terms of immune function, one might think, well, why wouldn't we just supplement with zinc all the time? And it's because the more we supplement with zinc, the more copper will start to decrease. And copper has lots of important functions in the body, like helping the body sort of carry oxygenated blood through the body. There's a whole lot of reasons why we don't want copper to be too low. So there's this little dance that these two guys play. And when I get a lab back like this, where it's showing that zinc is kind of on the lowish side here, we have our 5 quintiles. We generally like to see things kind of up around here in that 4th quintile, depending on what we're measuring. And so it takes about 6 months of consistent supplementation to move 1 quintile up, right? So it could take an entire year of supplementation for this person to move all the way up to this 4th quintile and be at about the copper levels or the zinc levels that we want. However, if that person were then to continue supplementing ongoing with zinc without support for copper, this would start to get lower and lower, and we would start to see copper-related deficiency problems in the person. So this is why, and also let's say for the purposes of our argument, this person's zinc was all the way up here in a healthy range, then they're going to get zero benefit from supplementing with zinc. However, they may be depleting their copper, right? So this is the kind of trouble that people get themselves into by reading some Yahoo News headline about a specific supplement and then going and buying it and taking it every day. There's something in my practice I call supplement creep, where patients will often come into me with a folder or a bag full of all the supplements they're taking. And I'll be like, who prescribed this to you, And it's just all over the map, and it's just slowly increased because their mother told them about this supplement, a friend's roommate, and it just keeps piling on until people are taking 30 different bottles of stuff and they have no idea why they're doing it. So this is where the labs come into play. It is critically important for us to understand your unique physiology when it comes to supplementation. Because for most people who are zinc deficient, the next, 6 months may be very critical time for us to supplement with zinc in order to shore up that immune function, right? It's going to take a while for copper to get in trouble with any of us, especially if we are taking a proper supplement that has a little bit of copper support as well. But we want to make sure that if it takes 6 months to kind of bump things up a quintile, we want to make sure that we are supplementing with that now if we need it, because over the next 6 months, that's probably going to be a critical window before we get other therapeutics for treating this particular virus, right? So let me take a little tea sip here. Okay, so that's an example of one of the particular nutrients that are important. And then here's so for each of these nutrients, I went and just pulled a little bit of research on them so you can understand how they work. This is This is something all of us should know about, you guys. So there's a national database called PubMed of all health research findings that come out. And it is a public domain. Everybody has access to it. You just go to pubmed.gov and you could search zinc and immune function or vitamin D3 and immune function. And you can look at the primary research yourself. And you don't have to be a biologist to understand most of this, especially the abstracts, which is sort of the summary that they give. And here we see that zinc is known to play a central role in immune function, and a zinc deficient person experiences increased susceptibility to a variety of pathogens. And they go on to discuss a lot more of that in here, but basically what it's saying is that, if you are zinc deficient, yes, indeed, you will be immune deficient. Do we want to be immune deficient right now? No, we do not want to be immune deficient right now. Okay, so moving on. Vitamin D. Okay, this is another one of those ones that everybody loves to talk about, and yet most people supplementing with it have absolutely no idea if they need it or not, or if they even should be taking it. And vitamin D can be toxic at high levels. So this is one that, like, everybody should know their vitamin D status. In my practice, we measure it using this ion panel. And we can get a very accurate reading of where people's vitamin D status is. Usually your primary care doc will check your vitamin D status on regular blood work. That's general practice, not always done, but generally done. And here we see the range on the lab of what we're looking for. So, and sorry, that's got a little cut off here, but basically we like people to be between about 50 and 80 here. Okay, and we see this person's coming in at a 30. So this would be a good candidate for someone who needs some vitamin D support. And once again, sort of like zinc, it typically takes, 6 months of supplementation to really start to boost that up in a significant way. So if we were looking at the next 6 months where we're wondering about, I don't know what's going on in terms of my immune function, and I'm kind of freaked out about, the current state of things, this is another one that probably would be smart to supplement with. You're not going to get yourself in trouble in 6 months from supplementing with vitamin D unless you're taking some crazy high amount, right? So this is another one that's really important. And this is fascinating, you guys. This is like one of the craziest things. And I hadn't heard this story before I started doing the research for this talk. So this is the kind of stuff that just gets me fired up. So vitamin D has been used unknowingly to treat infections such as tuberculosis before the advent of effective antibiotics. And so, before antibiotics were around, like, none of us really remember this, but tuberculosis used to be a serious problem. And it kind of, I think we get a little glimmer of what those people were feeling now, because right now we're faced with, a viral pathogen that there is no real effective treatment for at the current time. And this sort of probably gives us an idea of how people felt about tuberculosis prior to antibiotics coming around. And so one of the things, though, that they noticed was that if they treated people with sun exposure or with cod liver oil, which is a really rich source of vitamin D, they found that people could often overcome a tuberculosis infection. And what they didn't know at that time was that they were actually giving supplementation of vitamin D. They actually thought that, so it was common practice in these sort of sanatoriums for people to just go outside and get sun exposure. And they thought that the sun directly killed the tuberculosis organism, right? But it was actually the vitamin D and its effect on our immune function that was killing the tuberculosis. So awesome. That kind of stuff, just medical history, like, it's just something that's so interesting to go into, because we have been so wrong about so many things. And one of the things I love about having a background in Chinese medicine is that it was like an ongoing, 2,000-year clinical study. So the stuff that didn't work was tossed. And yeah, it's just I don't know, the medical history is just one of the most interesting things to me. And here's, okay, so then we're going to come up to vitamin C here, okay? Now, I was on the fence about whether I was going to include vitamin C on this talk. But then I decided it is absolutely worthwhile and it's absolutely worth us talking about because vitamin C is one of the most controversial of these nutrients, immune-based nutrients, right? So when we look at vitamin C, if you actually go onto PubMed, like I showed you guys a few minutes ago, and were to type in, I don't know, vitamin C upper respiratory infections or vitamin C immunity or something like that, you would see a ton of studies that come up because this is something that has been highly looked at. However, you would see that so much of the evidence is contradictory. So almost all of the meta-analysis, the large studies of the number that look at that, all of the smaller studies have shown that it's basically inconclusive whether vitamin C helps for immune function. Okay, so then we have to think, okay, well, how come? And here's sort of a diagram showing innate and adaptive immunity, like we talked about before, and how vitamin C plays a role in each of these steps. And this absolutely, these are well-studied, documented pathways of how vitamin C helps. So there is reason to, know that it helps. However, where vitamin C plays a very interesting role is in terms of kind of oxidative damage and inflammation in the body. So this is my kind of little segue pivot here that we're going to do towards talking about inflammation and oxidative damage. Now, inflammation and oxidative damage go hand in hand. Inflammation is the process by which the body is activating the immune response and kind of, directing and firing it up. And then oxidative damage is the damage to our cells that occurs as a byproduct of that inflammation. And one of the things that vitamin C does is it helps to stem that oxidative damage and kind of cool off that oxidative damage. So it is an antioxidant, and that's something that you guys have probably heard, a term you've heard many times. And an antioxidant is something that reduces the oxidative load of the body from the inflammatory response. And that inflammation could be coming from all kinds of places. It can come, so one of the first things our immune system does when we get hit by some kind of virus or pathogen, maybe it's Giardia or, it could be anything. It could be really anything invading the body, is the body will crank up systemic inflammation in response to that. And that systemic inflammation causes oxidative damage to all kinds of tissue of our body. This is why we do not want you guys chronically inflamed right now. Okay, when we are chronically inflamed, we are constantly sort of doing damage to the DNA of many of our cells, and our body is going around with its own internal antioxidant, that's called glutathione, trying to calm all this down and pat down all these little fires that are happening everywhere. But then we can use antioxidants like vitamin C to come in and play a role, right? So in this case, we measure vitamin C here, and this got cut off a little bit, but this basically said oxidative damage and antioxidant markers. And this guy right here, this phenolactate marker, this is a measurement of vitamin C needs in the body. And you would think that this would mean, hey, look at that, that's high. That means this guy must have a lot of vitamin C. He's doing great. No, what this is actually measuring is the damage that happens from a lack of vitamin C in the body. So that's what we're actually measuring here. So this is someone who, if they came into my clinic right now and they were concerned, or not, I guess no one's coming into my clinic right now, but let's say we were doing a telemedicine call and we were reviewing this lab for you to figure out how to kind of shore up your immunity best in the face of what we're all looking at right now. This would be someone I would look at and I would be like, oh, okay, like, we're not sure what's driving the inflammation in your body, but something has you highly inflamed, and we've got to cool things down and prevent that inflammation from damaging all the tissues of your body, including the immune cells, right? So all the immune cells of the body are just like any other cell, and they can be damaged by, you know, they can be damaged by oxidative stress. And this is actually how some of our drugs work. There's biologic drugs, chemotherapy drugs, where we're looking to actually suppress the body's immune function while we target something else. These drugs work by oxidatively damaging some of these immune cells. So it's pretty interesting. This is part of a test that we do. And look, these markers here, kynurenate and quinolinate, these are inflammatory markers of the body. And you can see that they're very high on this person. This is a highly inflamed individual, someone that we need to help. All right, well, I'm not going to get too into the weeds on that, but this person needs some help. These kind of labs, they don't tell us what is causing the inflammation. This could be excessive alcohol use. This could be really bad emotional stress over a long time, causing cortisol to go crazy and cause inflammation in the body. This could be some kind of infection in the gut. And you guys will remember that we covered all of those possibilities in webinar number 1 and 2. So go ahead and watch the replay of those, you guys, if you need. All right, let's continue chugging here. All right, so now we're going to come to our next topic, inflammation. So we've covered, zinc and its importance. We've covered vitamin D and its importance, vitamin C and its importance. And don't worry too much right now, you guys, about like how much of each of these should I be taking and everything else. We're going to email everybody who is on here a basic safe protocol that you can do right now if you are wanting to improve your immune health, okay? But once again, it's always better to know what is causing the problem, right? It's always better to know how it's affecting your individual physiology. For one person, their oxidative stress goes way up and we look at the lab and we're like, oh my God, get this person on some vitamin C fast, or glutathione fast. We need to bring this oxidative stress down. And other people will see that their zinc is totally depleted, or their B vitamins have been totally depleted, or so it plays out in different ways in different people. And if you just sort of supplement willy-nilly, it can be very hard to understand what it is that you actually need. And, like patients come in to me with these long lists of what they're taking like every month. And I look at that and we total it up, and they're spending an insane amount of money on supplements that they don't even need. And so once a year, I think it's pretty smart for people to sit down with somebody, like me, somebody who is trained in the lab-based application of supplement protocols, and like trim the fat, like get rid of all the stuff that you don't need. It's just, you're either dumping it in the toilet, wasting your money, and clogging up your liver. If you don't need it, it shouldn't be there. So that's my little tirade again. And once again, with inflammation, gets a bad rap, right? But inflammation is a vital, critical part of the body's immune function and part of its repair function. So we want a well-controlled, targeted immune response or inflammatory response in the body. What we don't want is chronic inflammation that then starts to like bleed out to other aspects of our body, right? And that could start like as I don't know, let's say you have a Prevotella infection in your gut, or E. histolytica or something like that, and your gut is constantly inflamed. And yes, I do see that I spelled systemic wrong here. Sorry, guys, I was throwing this together right before I got online here, so no need to take a red pen to any of what I'm doing, but there may be a few errors. So yeah, we don't want regular inflammation to become chronic. And the way that we take care of that is twofold. One, we have to always find the source of the chronic inflammation, right? This could be a imbalanced stress response, like a dysregulated stress hormone issue. This could be, like most times, I would say 7 out of 10 or 8 out of 10, it's some infection in the body that has gone undiagnosed, that is just sitting there constantly poking away at the gut, causing an inflammatory response. And we may not even have any GI symptoms. And, all that happens is it sits there constantly putting an inflammatory strain on the body. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen this in clinical practice. So just a quick example of that, and I know we covered this in the last webinar, but I'm going to throw this in just to let you guys see an example. So the typical type of test that we run at Origins Medicine for testing the GI function on people and looking for infections is what's called a PCR test. And this is a test where you are magnifying genetic particles it's done with a stool sample. So it's all these tests that I'm describing to you guys that we do in our practice. These are all tests that can be done from your home. They are mailed to you. You do samples of either saliva, urine, or stool. They kind of come with a little box that you just wrap everything up with a freeze pack and you just send it off. And so this is actually an incredible time during this shelter in place for us to gather information about our own health and take care of this, like any of this low-hanging fruit that is bogging down our immune function, bogging down our physiology. This is a perfect time to go in and like straighten that stuff out. But the first step is always data collection. This PCR technology is also the technology they're currently using for COVID-19. So you guys have all seen like the big cotton swab they stick like way up into your sinus and they move it around. What they're doing there is they're trying to capture little genetic pieces of this virus that they then can magnify using this PCR technology and see if you have the virus currently or not. Now, the problem with that technology is that it only tells you if you are currently infected, not if you were infected. And starting on Monday, and for any of my patients who are listening to this, if you want this, you can contact me. There is a new PCR COVID-19 test that's coming out that is a stool-based test. And the reason this is perhaps a better strategy than a nasal-based test, so you just do a little stool sample and you send it to the lab, is that it can tell, based on the PCR magnification, if COVID has been in your system within the last 30 days. Because COVID-19 will still shed in the stool even after it's disappeared from the sinus tissue. It'll still shed in the stool for up to 30 days. And so there is a test that we have access to starting on Monday, and I think it's like $150. It's not an expensive test. And it can tell you, like, was that bad, weird cough that you had a week ago that finally went away, was that actually COVID or not, right? It's not an antibody test. We don't have access to that yet, but it's like a further looking PCR test. So this was an example of a patient here who we tested, and lo and behold, they've got botulism, enterococcus, citrobacter. They have all kinds of infections. They've got a protozoic infection. They've got here under secretory IgA, we can see that their immune function is low and shot. This is a perfect example of like, do you want to go into a time where you want to count on your immune system with it burdened like this? No, you don't. And all of these infections are systemically inflaming the body. And that inflammation is drawing on all these other nutrients that are necessary. So we always want to think about, what is the source of the problem? If we don't take care of the source of the problem, everything else is just band-aids in terms of trying to get this stuff better. Okay, here is our commercial break. So this is a slide that my staff put in. So yeah, anyway, we are accepting patients at Origins Medicine. Our functional practice is a telemedicine practice. All the tests are done from home. And from watching these webinars, you'll get an idea of the kind of work that we do and the type of tests that we run. If anybody is interested, I've got this wonderful health coach, Jennifer. she's just amazing, actually. And you can book a free 15-minute consult with her by going to our website, and she can basically assess whether or not you are a good candidate for the type of work that we do at Origins Medicine, and whether functional testing and stuff is appropriate for where you are in your health journey. Okay, so that is the end of our commercial. Back to our regularly scheduled program. So as we start to talk about inflammation in the body, one of the things that we need to talk about primarily from a nutrient kind of standpoint are the omega-3 fatty acids, the fatty acid profile of the body, okay? And this is, once again, more complicated than it would initially appear. So we all know about omega-3s and omega-6s, right? We think of omega-3s as being anti-inflammatory. You know, we get it from flaxseed and, you know, all these other great sources of omega-3s. And we think of omega-6s as being generally inflammatory and causing an inflammatory load on the body. But it's not quite that simple. And this is why the research is mixed. So if you go and look at the research, you'll see omega-3s, a big study show that it's protective against certain cancers, protective against certain inflammatory conditions. And then you'll see research that shows, oh no, we put a ton of people on omega-3s and it didn't seem to have that effect. So what is going on? Because how can something be profoundly anti-inflammatory and then on some research shown to be ineffective? So it comes down to the basic profile of fatty acids that we have in our body, right? So here's another example of an ion panel that we run here at Origins. And we're looking at the omega-3 picture here and the omega-6 picture here. Now, generally in the American diet, so it's all about the ratio of these fatty acids. So in the American diet, we're way skewed. We have way too much omega-6 fatty acids. And this comes to us because of vegetable oils and poor quality, farm raised meat that is, feedlot, CAFO kind of meat and stuff. All of these things will drive up omega-6s in the body. And our healthy omega-3s are then kind of left in the dust a little bit. But this is like one of those situations, kind of like cholesterol, you guys, where we grew up with this story of good cholesterol and bad cholesterol. And then sometimes you have to stop and just think for a second, why would there be bad cholesterol? Why would the body make bad cholesterol? And this is such a ridiculous notion. It's where, once again, we are putting our judgments onto physiology. There is no bad cholesterol. You can have an unhealthy ratio of the types of cholesterol, but that bad cholesterol serves a very important function in the body. And if it's not there, then we would die, right? So when we think about the fatty acids, it's similar. We need to have a good, healthy, high level of omega-3s. And this person, I pulled this lab because I thought it was interesting, because I was only going to show one lab on this because we don't have a million hours. This is an example where this person's omega-6s are actually low. This is very rare to find on labs, but this is a situation where this person would want to supplement with omega-3s and omega-6 fatty acids. And what we're really looking at here in terms of inflammation is this guy down here, number 9, arachidonic acid. So arachidonic acid is the major inflammatory player, okay? So broadly speaking, we have alpha linolenic acid, ALA, which comes down here and eventually sort of becomes a anti-inflammatory pathway here. And then we have omega-6 acids like linoleic acid that come down and form into arachidonic acid. These are pro-inflammatory, they are immune provoking. And so in general, if you just ditch processed food, if there was one takeaway from this whole inflammation fatty acid conversation we were having right now, it is ditch processed food. Make sure you are eating good amounts or supplementing with good amounts of omega-3s. That can mean, clean fish 3 times a week. You want to watch out for mercury, obviously, but, clean fish, preferably small fish a few times a week, or supplementing with a couple grams of high quality fish oil a day is another good way to go about doing this. There are some vegan ways to do it as well, you guys. That's a little bit more of a conversation that I'll save for another time. Okay, so one of the ways in which the body controls inflammation, and this is, I'm not going to go too into this because I just want you to have the concept. But when omega-3s are present, the body needs to use these enzymes here, these kind of diamonds in the middle, these blue diamonds. It needs to use these enzymes for each step of conversion down the process of converting omega-3s from their initial form of alpha-linolenic acid all the way down to DHA, right? And there is only a certain supply of these enzymes within the body. So if there's a good amount of omega-3s, it will pull these enzymes over preferentially to the omega-3s, and the omega-6s kind of get stopped in their tracks. And this is one of the ways that supplementing with omega-3s can actually have a pretty profound effect on inflammation, even in the short term in the body. Because if you suddenly bring in a bunch of omega-3 fatty acids, you're stopping the conversion of these omega-6s to arachidonic acid. And remember, arachidonic is our inflammatory one. This is the one that's going to drive inflammation. So one of the most important things to do is to make sure that we're limiting any type of processed food. And I know this is tricky right now, you guys. Like, I'm trying to figure this out just like the rest of you, because we're trying to go to the store as infrequently as possible to protect our fellow citizens from COVID. We're on day 19 of staying home to prevent the spread of COVID-19, right? And so it's hard to get a lot of fresh food, and it's very easy to fall back on processed food right now. So just really kind of think about that. Like, frozen vegetables, those are often more nutritious than even the produce you would find in the produce aisle because it's flash frozen after picking. Canned fish and sardines can be a great way to bring up omega-3s. So just kind of, and then supplementation, you guys. Right now, supplementation is actually what a lot of us need. And like I said, I'm going to email all of you some basic guidelines for non-lab based supplementation to just be like, hey, what should I do in the next bunch of months to try to preserve and increase my immune function while bringing down inflammation, right? But really, it's getting to the source of the inflammation, getting to the source of the imbalances of the body, and supplementing in a smart fashion that actually makes sense. Otherwise, even some of the things that I recommend that you do may be not doing you any good because it's not targeted. It's like I have no idea what your oxidative load is. I have no idea what's happening with the B vitamins in your body. So what we're seeing right now with inflammation, and why I'm talking about this, is because you guys have probably heard of this term, a cytokine storm. And this is once again just from a PubMed search. So this whole cytokine storm idea came up during the H5N1 influenza infection, which was the avian flu. And what they noticed was that in a certain percentage of people, there seems to be this explosion of the inflammatory response that happens. And this is often centered around the lungs. And the lungs and the alveoli, these little structures where gas is exchanged over the lung tissue, is very like lacy, delicate tissue. And if there is a cytokine storm, and a cytokine, just to define terms, a cytokine is just a messenger. It's like an inflammatory messenger protein that the body puts out when an inflammation response is starting. And so if you have a storm of these messengers, it causes mass inflammation in the tissue affected, and then that inflammation will spread through the body to all the surrounding tissue, right? But the lungs are particularly susceptible to this. So what they saw during H5N1 and what they're seeing now with the COVID infections is this core morbidity problem, where people who are already inflamed, we've all heard this now, like it's really happening in New Orleans right now, especially, but people with obesity issues, diabetes issues, autoimmune issues, all these comorbidities. What those comorbidities are defined by is a disruption already of the inflammatory response. So these are people who are already chronically inflamed. And then something comes along, like a virus, or it could be some other pathogen, and it stimulates the immune function in an already inflammatory, disrupted individual, and suddenly you get this cascade of inflammation that goes through the body and affects this very delicate lung tissue. And this can lead to fibrotic changes in the lung tissue, which means that there can be implications to that inflammation in the lungs for we don't know with this particular situation yet, but people are having trouble with changes to their lung tissue. It's almost like scarring of the lung tissue after this inflammatory response that is going on for quite some time. It may affect people for the rest of their lives. We're just not sure yet. So one of the things that we can do right now is I want all of my patients to not be chronically inflamed right now. We don't understand the pathophysiology of this well enough yet to know who is susceptible. There is definitely a comorbidity problem where people who are already chronically inflamed get hit with this. Then there seems to be some kind of genetic trigger that is unidentified. I was listening to an interview with Dr. Fauci yesterday where he said one of the most fascinating things of this current situation is that there is a missing piece to the pathophysiology. We don't understand why some people have no symptoms or very mild symptoms, and other people get this cytokine storm and are in need of a ventilator. So there is some missing piece, but one thing we do know is that if you are chronically inflamed, you are more likely to have this issue. And so once again, you guys, this like while we're stuck at home, like in shelter in place, one of the best things we can do is gather information on what is happening with our stress hormones, what is happening with sort of other infections in the body, like in the gut. Those were our first two webinars, 1 and 2, right? And what is happening sort of physiologically, where the whole ship is sailing in terms of our nutrient needs and what we need to properly protect ourselves. So that's what cytokine storms are. And I'm just going to quickly, we're going to wrap up in just a minute here because I know we've been talking for a while. This is part of an organics test, an organic acid profile. And what this shows us is like what is happening from the standpoint of the immune cells at the mitochondrial level. So if we were to back this whole spaceship up furthest away, the 50,000 foot view of this entire problem, right? We always have to think about, okay, well, what are some of the primary blanketing principles of physiology? And one is that every cell is powered by a little guy called a mitochondria, which is the powerhouse of the cell. It creates ATP. Every cell has it. And if this basic and this energy production cycle to produce ATP, if you guys remember back to biology, it kind of looks like the spoke of a bicycle, and there's all these different steps that need to happen that end with the production of ATP, which is our currency of energy. You cannot have a healthy immune function, you can't have healthy brain function, proper energy, hormone production. Every single system of the body is dependent upon this cellular energy production. And this cellular energy production is dependent on B vitamins, amino acids, magnesium, coenzyme Q10. There's like this wide variety of them. And this is where I'm backing up to tell you that it's not just these few specific nutrients. We need to be covering all of our nutritional needs because our immune system is just part of our body. And if the rest of us is not healthy, we won't have a healthy immune function. And our markers here on this lab, markers 7 through 14, are measuring the steps of that citric acid cycle. And everywhere we see these red guys, we see these diamonds showing up in the red, are places where on that bicycle spoke, things are going off the rails and byproducts are backing up rather than moving down the chain to form ATP as they're supposed to. So this is a very critical thing for us to look at. All right, I'm not even going to get into this stuff. So, when we think about that from a larger standpoint, you can think about the immune system of the body, and these are going to be kind of my parting thoughts on this. The immune system of the body is almost like the most incredible, high-end Mercedes you could possibly think of. Maybe costs like, it's an SL that costs $180,000 out the door and stuff. But if it doesn't have gas and oil and coolant, like our zinc, our vitamin D, our omega-3s, and the other nutrients that are critical for function, then it just sits there. It doesn't really do anything. It's just like a paperweight for us to look at. And this idea in a car, as magnificent as our imaginary Mercedes right now, it is the top of the line performance vehicle there is. And that's how our natural immune response is. We don't need to boost it. You don't need to boost a Mercedes like that, right? We don't need to boost our immune function. We need to normalize our immune function. We need to get the barriers that are weighing it down out of the way and restore it. Our immune function is an incredibly efficient machine that has been designed over millions and millions of years of evolution. It is incredible as it is. We don't need to do anything to boost it. We just need to restore proper function. And that's what functional medicine is all about. Functional medicine is about testing and correcting the barriers to normal physiology, right? And so that's what we do here. And we look at it from a very basic flow. We check the stress response of the body, we look for pathogens within the gut, and we basically help restore these two systems and help the body detox. And we look at all the key nutrients at all these different steps in order to restore proper immune function to the body. So once again, and we're not going to get into that. Specific protocols and stuff will be emailed, okay, along with webinar 1 and 2, if you guys want to watch those, where I explain about the mucosal barrier and how to protect that and keep that safe. That's our first viral entry point or pathogen entry point. How to take care of the gut and boost our natural immunity and the largest immune barrier of the entire body, which is the gut. And then specific nutrient protocols that we discussed a little bit about today. And then if anybody wants to work with me one-on-one, then just go to originsmedicine.com and you can book your initial 15-minute consult with Jennifer, who truly is just a wonderful, smart human being and is a great first step for you guys to understand if functional medicine is appropriate for you. And once again, during this time that we're all hunkered down, this is when we should be sorting out our health issues. I want every single one of my patients, all of them, I can see that there's a bunch of my patients on this, and I can see there's a bunch of people who I don't know on this, but I want every single one of you leaving this weird time we are in healthier than when you went in. I saw yesterday that alcohol sales are up 55% nationally. There are people who are destroying their health right now, you guys, and we need to stay out of the emergency room. Like, our other health issues don't stop while this happens. In fact, the stress of all of this and the way we self-medicate in unhealthy ways is going to drive a lot of these health issues further. And we need to be sorting all this stuff out right now so that we don't place a burden on the larger healthcare system. All right, so with all that said, you guys, I'm going to sign off, and this was part 3 of our 3-part webinar. I am going to continue with some future webinars. They're going to be, I think, every Friday, and I'll be on my social media, on Facebook, and I actually started Instagram. I haven't really used it, but I will be giving a schedule of those. What I'm going to pivot to now for future webinars are more like 20-minute kind of quick webinars on specific health issues that people are struggling with during this shelter in place, like sleep and inflammation and pain and, stress, anxiety and depression, like sort of quick like how can we help ourselves in the moment from these issues that we're facing. So I look forward to seeing you guys on some of those webinars, and thanks for holding your attention to this for an hour, you guys. I really appreciate it. So once again, Duncan from Origins Medicine, and I'll talk to you guys later. Okay, bye-bye.